Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's now 12 o'clock, so I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Virtual Inspections, Navigating the New Paradigm. My name is Megan Bailey. I'm part of ISPE Boston's Educational Programs Committee. Before we get started, I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping items. First, I'd like to thank our program sponsors, DPS Group, ICQ Consultants, and Massey Bioservices. Next, some information on how you'll participate in today's event. You will have the opportunity to submit your questions for Monica by typing your questions into the Q&A session on Pigeonhole. A link to the Pigeonhole question and answer platform has been provided in your confirmation email. It's also listed in the chat box. You may send your questions at any time during the presentation, and you can also upvote questions that have already been submitted. We will collect these questions and address them at the end of the presentation. Lastly, we hope that you'll continue the conversation on the chapter's social media platforms listed here. I would like to introduce our speaker. Monica Commerford, Ph.D., is the Manager of Regulatory Affairs at Brammer Bio in Cambridge, Massachusetts, part of Thermo Fisher Scientific. She previously worked as a microbiologist and consumer safety officer in Branch 4 in the Division of Microbiology Assessment, Office of Process and Facilities, Office of Pharmaceutical Quality in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at the FDA. She is an expert in the microbial control, product quality microbiology, and sterility assurance of investigational new drug applications and biological license applications submitted to CDER and performed pre-license inspections of biological product manufacturing facilities. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Monica Commerford. Monica?
All right. Hi there, everyone. Please give me a moment as I'm trying to navigate this. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you're able to see my screen. Is there a way to confirm? Well, thank you, Megan, for the introduction. Looks good. That's wonderful to hear. Thank you, Megan, very much for the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for attending the webinar today. I'm very excited to be here today to present for the ISPE Boston chapter. As Megan mentioned, my name is Monica Commerford, and I'm the Manager of Regulatory Affairs at Thermo Fisher Scientific Viral Vector Services, formerly Brammer Bio. I'm very excited to be here today to talk about the cutting-edge technology we're implementing at Thermo Fisher Scientific that enables us to perform our mission-critical regulatory commitments. And as Megan mentioned, prior to joining Thermo Fisher Scientific, I was a product quality microbiology BLA reviewer and pre-licensing inspection lead within the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality and FDA's CDER. So understanding the regulatory landscape for biologics has been a big part of my life now for approximately 4.5 years. And now, with our teams within Thermo Fisher Scientific, we are able to advance that regulatory understanding and really push to help accelerate and improve industry standards to become an innovative industry leader. And it's been an exciting year for us at Brammer Bio, and we are privileged to be presenting here as part of Thermo Fisher Scientific. As we are celebrating 1 year since the acquisition of Brammer Bio by Thermo Fisher Scientific, we continue to see the huge potential and opportunities that this brings in order to allow us to bring critical therapies to the people who need them, the patients. And we're all thrilled to be a part of Thermo Fisher Scientific's efforts and to bring their expertise to help us bring these products to market faster. Thermo Fisher Scientific is known for leading innovative technologies, world-class equipment, clinical trial management, and strong drug substance and drug product operations. And as you can see here in the slide, Viral Vector Services falls within the Pharma Services Group. Being a part of the Pharma Services Group and more broadly within the Thermo Fisher Scientific Network allows us to focus on what makes us unique in this and helps us to build without building expertise in other areas, and helps us to deliver world-class viral vector manufacturing that will benefit our patients. Now, just to give you a little bit of history before we start talking about this new technology that we've been recently implementing across our network. Brammer Bio was founded by Richard Snyder back in 2006 with a vision to make vectors for clinical investigation and for clients. In 2016, Mark Bamforth merged Florida Biologics with Brammer Bio, and following this, we've grown from 100 employees to over 700. And this ultimately led us to being acquired by Thermo Fisher Scientific in May of 2019. We consist of 4 sites: the founding Alachua early phase development site, our 2 commercial sites in Cambridge, Massachusetts and Lexington, Massachusetts, and our warehouse in Somerville, Massachusetts. And it's no big secret that Thermo Fisher Scientific is committed to growth, and we've made it clear, so much so that we recently have announced public plans to build a new 290,000 square foot commercial manufacturing facility in Plainville, Massachusetts. Brammer Bio is now Raytheon Viral Vector Services, part of Thermo Fisher Scientific, and we were able to pull a team together with expertise in biologics to bring that expertise to viral vector manufacturing, and in turn to help us bring quality products to market, which brings me to our topic here today. How we've used virtual inspections to help us to continue to perform these mission critical activities in collaboration with our clients and global health authorities. While we have already been using these technology for our clients, we've in fact recently wrapped up an EMA inspection for the manufacture of cell banks associated with one of our clients' commercial applications to Europe. And in talking about virtual inspections, I first wanted to give you an overview of the regulatory landscape and why virtual inspections are a useful resource, especially during times where business continuity needs to be managed and travel restrictions are in place. Then I'd like to hit on the advantages that virtual inspections provide over the traditional on-site inspection experience, and then talk about the technology itself and how we've been able to implement it across our VBS sites. Finally, I'll end with what I think will be the future state of using virtual facility inspections in the coming years. And I'm just going to talk about the elephant in the room right now. The world has been living in a pandemic for over half a year now. And in a time where biopharmaceutical manufacturing and industry has become global, there are challenges that need to be overcome in order to ensure that the people that we care about most, the patients, are getting the medicines that they need. One major challenge has been how to allow regulatory authorities to keep their commitments to the public by performing the necessary inspections. Now, these inspections are critical part of the pharmaceutical and biotech manufacturing global infrastructure, and they're needed to verify that the manufacturers are indeed operating under CGMPs and to ensure that drugs are safe, pure, and potent. However, during this COVID-19 crisis, both the US FDA and the EMA have scaled back regulatory inspections. In fact, in its statement to the public, the FDA indicated that they may evaluate records in lieu of an on-site inspection, and this would be in line with the Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act and also with the Food and Drug Cosmetics Act, while the EMA is allowing remote assessments of compliance. I also wanted to note here that the FDA briefly discussed this last month during the ISPE Biomanufacturing Conference as well, on how they are requesting records in lieu of an on-site inspection when the risk to waiving an inspection is low. However, there are regulatory authorities like the Australian Therapeutic Goods Administration, the TGA, that has recently allowed for performing virtual inspections because of its promise and ability to overcome the traditional disadvantages that an on-site inspection can have, like how do you travel during a travel ban, for example. Pharmaceutical groups have reached out to the FDA to try to convince them and even suggest that virtual inspections may be key and the way to go to allow for CGMP verification. The major takeaway here is from the Fierce Pharma article above that virtual facility inspections during a pandemic can help to ensure the continuous supply of much needed drugs, not just for the United States, but nationwide and worldwide. And because of our commitment to patients, Thermo Fisher Scientific's Pharma Services Group Tech Ops team had led the way for the use of a mixed reality platform enterprise-wide and had already developed a path for VVS to use the virtual inspection experience for client audits and regulatory health authority inspections. This has certainly been timely for us, as this path has allowed us to maintain business continuity without sacrificing client and regulatory responsibilities. And as part of our virtual inspection option, we can use Microsoft Teams or software that we are already comfortable using in our daily activities. Features of Teams allows us to have review of quality documents during the inspection, along with real-time video conferencing for discussion. We also have real-time online video streaming of our GMP facilities using the 360-degree camera. On the right, you can see an image of one of our staff interacting with and talking to the inspector in real time as if the inspector is in the room with her, and you can see her move her hands around, and you can determine by her body language that she's acting as if the inspector is in the room with her. Now, the photo at the bottom of the screen is not the inspector, but rather that's our head of quality at our Alachua site, Tony DeFusco. And you can see that he's listening intently to this interaction, but he would also have the opportunity to chime in on the discussion if needed. And as you can see in these pictures here, using the 360-degree camera on the facility side isn't as daunting as you would think. For our setup, we've attached a camera to a cell phone or an iPad and mounted it on an IV pole. Now, this pole can be wheeled around the facility on smoother surfaces, and the camera itself has a high enough pixel resolution to read documents, labels, logbooks, and whatnot during the tour. The other advantage to using this is its cleanability. So for example, if needed, you can go in and out of rooms with this setup with the appropriate cleaning studies performed, of course. And like I indicated earlier, with this technology, virtual inspections can occur in all GMP spaces. However, the 360-degree camera that I talked about isn't the only technology that we use. Depending on the surface, you may need to transition to another piece of technology. So for example, you don't want to roll an IV stand around a bumpy surface, or there may be some spaces or activities that aren't accessible by the 360-degree camera. In these cases, we can use the Microsoft Hololens, and this piece of virtual reality technology allows us to show and perform activities that you may not be able to perform or otherwise show using the 360-degree camera. So for example, showing an activity in the biosafety cabinet or looking into an HVAC system, opening filters to see how clean they are just one of many examples of the activities they can show using the HoloLens. However, one caveat to using this equipment is making sure that your safety team is on board to ensure that the operators are being safe and that the operators are trained appropriately to use the equipment. When you are in this virtual reality environment, you may experience some instability while walking, for example, so your safety team really needs to be involved, and you may want to follow their guidance on using augmented reality in difficult or dangerous situations. And in addition to this type of technology as part of our virtual inspection experience, we also can use the Matterport 3D technology mapping software and camera. Now, you've probably seen this technology before, especially if you like house hunting and you peruse the real estate websites. A lot of realtors have been using these to virtually map homes for online viewing. And the same principles apply here. We are virtually mapping our facilities to orient auditors and inspectors to our facility prior to giving them the virtual live stream tour using the 360-degree camera. Now, this Matterport 3D mapping technology is simply a marketing tool and should not replace the live stream tour during the inspection. The views and streaming using the HoloLens or the camera is really where the action is here and is really what the inspectors and auditors are looking forward to. And for those of you that are not familiar with this technology, so you don't go on Zillow or Trulia to look for virtual tours of homes or know what this looks like in practice, on this slide, I have a video of what Matterport 3D mapping looks like and part of our QC space at our Alachua facility. Just please give it a moment to start. And as you can see through the video, as we go through it, you can see that the space is in high resolution. And you can also get 360-degree views of the space as well. Areas of the space are clickable and thus viewable. And honestly, when I look at these scans, I wonder if the rendering is sometimes too good, because you can see how beautiful and sunny it is in Florida, whereas right now in Massachusetts, it's a little gloomy on my end over here. And now I also wanted to mention that this technology, the 360-degree camera live stream tour using the Hololens, plus this 3D mapping, is, like I said, only part of the inspectional experience. And it is really paired with the next slide that I'm going to show. But before we go on, we're going to finish the video and just to give you a better appreciation of what the Matterport technology looks like. And this is paired all with the second element of the inspection, which is document review and control of document review. Using Microsoft Teams can help to organize documents in a way that facilitates review by inspectors and allows us to have the documents stored in a controlled manner. In this slide, I have a simple example of how you can organize your documents into directories and folders within the Microsoft Teams software. And this can also be provided to the inspectors as well ahead of time. And while Teams can be viewed on the native application as software on your computer, it can also be solely viewed on the web. And viewing it in this web-based browser certainly has its advantages for both sides, for both the site and the inspectors. On our side, we have more control over the documents. And in our experience, the EMA was accepting of viewing files temporarily on the web. The web-based browser has the same functionality, and the risk of downloading viruses is low, or having other issues is lowered, because regulators and organizations have their own tools in place to ensure that their internal IT infrastructure is not compromised by a web-based application. Now, at this point, I wanted to touch upon the strategies that we have used to implement virtual inspections and audits network-wide and what we have learned. I will focus on the 4 topics here to really think about how inspectional roles are the same or different between a virtual inspection and a traditional on-site inspection, what additional IT and logistical considerations you need to think of, and also what to think about for training and how to get the auditors or inspectors themselves comfortable with the platform that we have here. Now, first, we found that the same roles typically apply between on-site inspections versus virtual inspections online. You still have your escorts, your scribes, your ready room, and your strategy room, but you do need new players to maintain continuity. And we found that a new component now that has more time in the spotlight are the digital support team. This group becomes key now to help ensure a smooth experience. And we've also found that with this cutting edge technology, our IT department was very excited about it because they were able to showcase their IT skill, and we were able to highlight their IT talent, which can often be overlooked in an organization. And in general, all of these roles are happening digitally, just within different channels in Microsoft Teams. And controlled access is important here. Only people with the right access should be allowed in the audit room, etc., versus a traditional one where you can post someone physically at the door to control access to your strategy room or to your ready room. Now, to continue to ensure a smooth inspectional experience, this would also require you to think about performing wireless access data point mapping. We did this at our Alachua site to understand the wireless signal strength in all of our rooms that we had at our facility. Our site already had a long history of using cell phone communication in our rooms, so concern for signal strength was considered low for us. Also, based on our experience, we'd recommend having multiple 360-degree cameras ready and staged throughout the site in places you know you'll be touring or inspectors, you know that inspectors will want to view. This reduced cleaning and transition time for us, so that way there was no dead air time during the tour. Finally, we'd also like to recommend using a 5G a wireless capability, as it lends credibility to your inspection. So for example, when the power goes out, the inspectors will be able to witness what we do when this happens, and the inspection doesn't go dark. And logistically, you would really have to also think about the cleanability of the equipment and ensuring that the people on the other end, the inspectors or the client auditors, understand that this is a live inspection and live tour, so there should be no screenshots or recordings. Now, regulatory agencies are allowed to do this, but this would be no different than taking a picture or taking samples during an on-site inspections by a regulatory health authority. You would want to also consider preparing a tour route and site map to orient inspectors as well. Another way to ensure a smooth inspection experience is really the training. On the facility side, performing mock virtual runs with your team is very useful, so they know what to expect. If the staff will be using the Hololens to perform an activity or show a space that is not typically accessible by the 360-degree camera, then you would want to mock that ahead of time to allow for your team to know what it's like to be in a virtual reality environment. There is a lot of upfront work here, really, to ensure that the experience for both your teams and the inspector or auditors is smooth. But you'll find that there will be room for improvement, and potentially more trainings would be needed to flesh out any issues you may experience during the mock runs. And training really doesn't only happen on the facility side. Your inspector or auditor will also need to be trained to a certain degree. What do their computer skills look like, for example? Can they access the files and the locations that we say that they're in? And this is where a pre-meeting really comes in handy. Pre-meetings with inspectors or client auditors help you to really gauge their level of understanding of the software and whether they need more or less help to navigate the platform. Pre-meetings also help you build credibility for the platform as well, so they can see that, yes, this is just like an on-site inspection and it's a viable platform option. It's very important to ensure that this is a good and trusted experience for your inspector. Now, this gives you the opportunity to meet ahead of time with the pre-meeting without the pressure of being in an inspection environment, in order to try to build that rapport that you would sometimes lack or somewhat lack when you have a virtual meeting and they are not on site. At the pre-meeting, you can also discuss pre-meeting requests and schedules to ensure that the inspection is on time. Now, there are some advantages and disadvantages to both the on-site inspection and the virtual inspection, and I wanted to briefly touch upon these based on the differences here and based on what we've observed with conducting an inspection virtually. We found that both take up similar amounts of time, the pre-meeting notwithstanding, and in our recent EMA inspection, we had 4 half days rather than 2 full days. This allowed us to maintain work during business hours and to use the other 4 hours really to answer questions or to prepare for the next inspectional day. The final day was typically our wrap-up day and helped us to ensure closure of any open items. We also found that the inspectors like to stick together and cover somewhat similar material, which could lead to the inspectional dynamic being slightly slower. Now, while this is an interesting dynamic during a virtual inspection experience and is not one that is generally experienced on site, we anticipate that over time, as regulatory authorities become more comfortable with virtual inspections, they might not necessarily stick together. Additionally, we held our inspection over the course of non-consecutive days, and this helps to ease the burden of hosting responsibilities for the site. We did note, however, that questions posed during normal discourse in an on-site traditional inspection are typically answered during tours has shown us that the dynamic has really changed during the virtual inspection piece. Rather, we have quick questions are becoming part of a daily list that inspectors provide to the site. And then this becomes an advantage to us, we feel, where there is now time for us to prepare responses and to present them accordingly during the next inspectional day. Another big advantage here is that multiple SMEs from different sites can participate and be able to answer questions live without traveling. And they can be available during the tours, during document review, etc. And we found this to really be a big win for us. Also, during the virtual inspection experience, you really can't read body language, and it's sometimes hard to get a great read on the status of the inspection. So you have to answer a lot of questions on whether we can move on. Finally, the other difference that we noted is that there is additional prep work required that's associated with training to use the software and the technology. But this initial work is needed for the experience, and once you've put in the work and it becomes standard, it's simply maintained like you would for a traditional on-site inspection. And really, a lot of these disadvantages are simply due to the fact that using this platform is really in its infancy. And as we use it more, we grow our understanding and knowledge of it, so it may become standard. Now, we've only recently concluded our EMA inspection at our Latchwas site at the end of May, and our experience has shown us that this is a viable platform that will revolutionize how we perform inspections. The technology itself hasn't gone unnoticed by the regulatory authorities. In fact, the EMA inspector had this to say, that this has been a new thing for us and has been a positive experience. You may not realize it, but I have this on a bigger screen and the audit is almost life-sized. Now, we know there are struggles with inspections and auditing, and there have been solutions to those issues. But what success looks like to us is that these auditors can adequately access the environment. They have access to our effective procedures at SMEs, regardless of what this inspectional outcome is. And it's not really about achieving a favorable outcome, but showing that the environment is as capable as an in-person experience. And our inspection with the EMA only validated our platform and indicated to us that it is just as good, if not better, than a traditional on-site inspection. I would argue it's a little better because they didn't necessarily have to travel. And in fact, during the closeout, the EMA inspector even used the phrase, quote, during the tour, end quote. It wasn't qualified with during the virtual tour or live stream tour, simply the tour. And we found this to be great. It already showed us that the platform had been accepted as comparable to a traditional inspection. And I consider this a turning point for us here, where we have the capability to do this now, and to continue using this cutting edge technology will only help us to innovate how inspections are being performed. And with the viability of these mixed reality platforms, the scope of applications our Pharma Services Tech Ops team has been working on as part of the Pharma 4.0 initiative, has really been called a new industrial revolution. It will provide inline and in-time control over businesses, operations, and quality, and its implementation will resemble an evolution in which digitization and automation meet to engage, educate, and enable people like never before. With 4.0, we envision highly efficient automated processes, which could be continuous, batch, or hybrid of these, that are driven by an integrated manufacturing control strategy. Digitization connects everything, and this new level of heightened transparency will allow operators to have more tools available to them. And when we can couple operators to equipment, data, and where a needed interaction with our processes, we are really enabling them with what we call superpowers, which is the ability to interact with the equipment and these processes seamlessly. This allows for faster diagnostics via real-time and data-driven decisions. And really the take home of this slide here is that mixed reality platforms really provide a new level of learning and understanding and allows the operator to have multiple tools available to enable any step-by-step process to be performed error-free. By learning differently, we enable the operators to perform with added confidence and skill. Training is traditionally a one-time event where observed behavior prepares you for the expected behavior, and over time, it declines and deviates from the expected behavior. Mixed reality really are able to guide us in an experiential way and act as a daily calibrator, since required elements to perform the job are embedded and continually reinforced every single time. In addition, operators can also practice in a mixed reality simulator to further enhance familiarity and to build muscle memory without the added pressure and scrutiny of performance demands. In this way, operators performance and overall compliance improves dramatically. And with that, I wanted to acknowledge the people who helped me put this information together for you today. And if you'd like to learn more about the technology that I presented on, please feel free to reach out to Doug Ruffino, our Senior Director of Patheon Services and the Technical Ops Group at Thermo Fisher Scientific. And I've included his contact information here. Finally, I'd like to thank you for your attention and participation. And once again, I'd like to thank the organizers for this opportunity to speak with you today. I'm happy to take any questions you have during the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. That was great. It looks like there are quite a few questions for you, so let's get to those. Are there any drawbacks to using Microsoft Teams, and would other software platforms work?
So Microsoft Teams is a platform that we're comfortable working with, which is one of the reasons why we're using it during our virtual inspection experience. Certainly you can try to use other platforms that you are comfortable working with as well, but the advantages we found with Microsoft Teams is that you're able to create channels, you're able to send out specific meeting invites to specific channels that can allow for restricted access, and you can also jump from potentially one call to another within Microsoft Teams as well. But other platforms may be a perfectly viable option. You would just need to take into consideration what the logistical aspects of using that platform are.
Great. Have there been any concerns regarding privacy or capturing video of people without their consent? Are there legal implications, and how can that be mitigated?
Based on my current understanding, I haven't come across any issues regarding privacy or capturing people without their consent. Typically, because these interactions should not be recorded, especially during client audits, I would only speculate that that may not be an issue. But of course, that may be something you would want to consider and talk to your legal team at your own facility before thinking about implementing this technology. Now, that's a really good question. I haven't actually thought about that one before.
So can you provide any thoughts about virtual tours through video conferences like WebEx?
So I think this goes back to the first question that was asked, that you can really try to think about using other platforms that you are comfortable with in your organization. We've just found that Microsoft Teams works better for us.
Is the platform 21 CFR Part 11 compliant?
So that's a really good question, and this was not actually a question that came up during our EMA inspection. And I would actually argue that the platform doesn't necessarily have to be 21 CFR Part 11 compliant, simply because it is not a GMP system, and it's not a GMP, source document system. We're just going through these questions, aren't we, Megan?
Yeah, we're gonna do them all. You're doing great. Does Teams need to be validated?
So I think that goes back to the 21 CFR Part 11 question, where because this is not a GMP platform, we do not necessarily validate our Microsoft Teams software for this. And it wasn't, I should also say, it wasn't asked about during the EMA inspection either.
Based on your talk, this works for the EMA, and the TGA may be receptive to it. What about the FDA?
So that's a really good question, and I've been trying to really think about where the FDA's perspective is on this. And as I mentioned during my presentation, there was a senior scientific advisor within the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality from CDER that presented during the ISPE Biomanufacturing Conference last month. Her name is Dr. Patricia Hughes, and she was actually my former branch chief when I was at the agency, so small world there, right? But when she presented at ISPE, she indicated that right now the agency is more looking towards waiving inspections based on risk and using Section 704 of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, which I think aligns with Section 706 of FDASIA, in requesting records to be submitted to them in lieu of on-site inspections. right now, based on my understanding of what the agency is looking for, they may be open to it, but they are not currently pursuing this route. However, I'm hoping this changes, considering the EMA thinks of this as a viable platform, and that the TGA may be receptive to it as well. And if we can get other global health authorities interested and actually using this platform, I think that would be a huge boost, not only for ourselves, but I think for our patients as well, who are benefiting from the medicines that we're manufacturing for them.
How relevant are virtual tours for health authority inspections not focused on GMP sites? Can virtual inspections be extended for non-GMP facilities or inspections?
Now, this is a very interesting question to think about, considering my presentation mostly focused on, GMP facilities and GMP inspections. Could talk about, perhaps be related to pre-licensing inspections for submissions or even surveillance inspections. But as we're thinking about non-GMP facility inspections, I can only imagine that this platform would absolutely be useful for that as well, considering the goal of the inspection, whether it's on-site or virtual, is the same. They just want to come and ensure that the facility is operating either in line with GMPs in one case, or just checking in on the facility in a non-GMP manner. So I would only speculate that virtual inspections can be extended for non-GMP and non-GMP facility inspections, simply because the platform seems to be a viable option to perform inspections in general.
Are there concerns about parties viewing the video taking screen captures of the facility?
I mean, of course there are, right? So one way that we've navigated around that is that we would have to, during the pre-meeting and prior discussions to the inspection, we have discussions about how no recordings are allowed to be taken, no screenshots are allowed to be taken, and certainly legal documents can be signed to that effect as well. But when it comes to a regulatory health authority, it's kind of hard to say, no, you can't do this, especially if they're able to do it in an on-site traditional inspectional capacity. So if they wanted you to take a picture on site, they simply ask you to take a picture. And that's what I've done in my previous life before. When I wanted something in real time to show and capture what I'm seeing, I've asked the facility to take a picture and provide me with that copy. Or I know some other inspectors prefer to take their own pictures on their government issued phones or whatnot as evidence as part of any observations that come up. So, but regulatory health authorities aside, you would really want to lay out the rules between you and your client auditors prior to the start of the virtual inspection. But ultimately, you can't see what's going on their end. You would just be very hopeful that they follow the agreement that's in place.
How often do you update the virtual tours, and can you speak to associated costs related to the size of your space for the virtual?
So I'm going to separate this question into two buckets. So first, if we talk about virtual live stream tours using the 360-degree camera, and I noticed in my slides, I mentioned the EMA Tour software that we use for this, but really I think other software can be used as well. That's live streamed, so you don't really update that part of the virtual tour. You take them on through the entire facility. You're pushing that IV stand around with the camera attached, and you're taking them to that facility. There have been times during client audits and also during our recent regulatory inspection where they asked to see logbooks. So you bring the logbook up to that and it shows you that it's in real time and whatnot. Now, concerning the second bucket with the Matterport scanning technology, admittedly, how often we would update that versus the associated costs that would require be associated with updating that, I'm not quite sure of just yet, because we've only recently implemented this technology. We haven't gone through another iteration where we would have to update the Matterport scanning technology. If anyone here is part of a real estate firm that could potentially talk about that too, I'm sure the idea and the context of what the cost would be similar, but of course, there will be variations depending on how large the space is. These are some really good questions, Megan.
I am impressed. Good job, community. Do you allow the inspector to download files from the team's document folder?
So based on our experience, what we've seen is that inspectors would typically want to view them in a web-based format rather than downloading them. And that could be for, there are some fears or concerns on their side for downloading viruses, or maybe that's what their organization is telling them, not to do. In terms of allowing them to download files, I'm not sure that we've come across a situation where that has happened. I'm sure it has, but nothing's really preventing them from downloading these files on, on their end. But what I would also like to remind the audience is that this would be similar to them asking for these documents for evidence for their, establishment inspection reports, for example. So when I was an inspector with the FDA, I would go out to the facilities, I would gather all this evidence and bring it back with me to the FDA. And I would argue that downloading files in this format, at least from a regulatory health authority perspective, would be similar to gathering those documents and bringing them back to, the agency.
What if you're experiencing technical difficulties during an audit? How can you avoid making a stressful situation even more stressful?
So admittedly, this has happened a couple times with some of our client audits, but we've been able to navigate it very well. And that's because when you have your pre-meeting and you're establishing this rapport out with the client auditor or even with the regulatory health authority inspector, you're discussing what the logistics are of the platform. And at that time, you also can discuss that if we do experience technical difficulties, this is what we can do to help mitigate that. We have someone on call to, you can call this number and they will help walk you through it. One technical difficulty that we found that seemed to be, was a little interesting for us is that when inspectors had come online, they often were trying to use their logging into the Microsoft Teams through their own personal or organizational accounts. And we found that if we allow them to log into the web-based version that was created for the platform, they actually had a smoother experience and they were able to access those documents more. But really, when you're thinking about making a stressful situation less stressful, I would say you really want to think about how to make your auditor or inspector comfortable. That's where the pre-meeting comes in. Just be very transparent about what the issues could be, so that way they don't necessarily second guess you or question you about, oh, maybe they're trying to hide something. And that's certainly something that we all want to avoid. We don't want, especially regulatory health authorities, thinking that we're trying to hide something. So building that rapport is going to be challenging because it's in a virtual environment and you're meeting in a virtual space, but that's where the transparency and flexibility and additional support really come into play to make your inspector comfortable with the platform.
Good question. Can you describe the structure of the team's document folder and permissions to facilitate the ready room activities to support the inspection room?
So we found that across our different sites, sometimes we've been using Microsoft Teams in order to help facilitate these virtual reality inspections. And what was nice about Microsoft Teams is you can have different channels and you make specific folders for document requests or pre-request documented lists, agenda items, site tour map, etc., on those folders and give specific people access to that. We've also found that within Microsoft Teams, you can make other channels which specifically specify a ready room or specifically specify a strategy room in the back, or have Audit Utopia running in the background, for example, that only specific people have access to. And the way we've been trying to restrict access back into the audit room is by only giving SMEs the specific meeting invite for that audit room at the time that they're requested to go in. So really it's about the structure is what you make of it, and using the capabilities of the Teams platform. I think it's an easier way to help organize and facilitate all the aspects of the inspection. That certainly doesn't necessarily preclude you from using Teams for certain aspects of the inspection, maybe WebEx for another, for example. That's certainly one strategy that we've also taken on site, depending on what our needs were at that time.
All right. Do time zones become an issue in doing things like this remotely?
I think time zones are an issue in doing things remotely in general, especially when you have colleagues from halfway around the world and there's a 12-hour time difference, right? When you need to have a meeting with them about an urgent topic. But in general, we found that inspectors have been accommodating to our business hours, considering that during an on-site inspection, they would also have to be accommodating during those business hours as well, because they'd be traveling like into the United States, for example, and going through the Eastern time zone, right? I'm sure that if there are issues with timing, that can certainly be discussed prior to the start of the inspection. What was really nice, I told you in our case, in our Alachua site with the EMA Inspection, is that we had 4 non-consecutive half days, which meant, we were able to start the inspection from like 8 in the morning to noon, and the inspectors were in Europe, so there's a 6-hour time difference, so that worked out for them too nicely. But because they were half days, I would argue that you can shift it throughout the day as necessary as well.
Have you explored performing virtual vendor audits, contract manufacturers, for example? If yes, have external partners been receptive to allowing virtual vendor audits?
So this is a really, really good question. Certainly we've thought about it, but I'm not aware of actually performing a virtual inspection for one of our vendors, because that would require them to have the technology on their end. So unfortunately, I don't have more to add to that question or to that answer.
And we are on to our last question.
European or US time. So depending on the time zone, really, and the flexibility of the inspector and your team as well. And I'm sure, because everyone's goal here in general is to give the regulatory health authority, even a client auditor, a good view of your facility, you will try to accommodate their schedules, and I'm sure they'll try to accommodate our schedules too, right? So we have the common goal here of making sure that all of our regulatory and client commitments are made and are met. So I'm sure that on both ends, people will be flexible and accommodating.
All right, I think that does it for the questions. Thank you so much, Monica. You had a lot of expertise to share, and it was a great webinar. Thank you everyone for joining today and your interest in supporting ISPE Boston Chapter Education Programming. You'll receive a follow-up email with a short survey, and it's great if you can answer that. It gives us wonderful feedback about the webinars going forward. You will also receive an email with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. Thank you to our dedicated sponsors, DPS Group, ICQ Consultants, and Massey Bioservices. On behalf of ISPE Boston and our presenter, thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Monica.